Colangiocarcinoma, I think, is one of the great challenges for HPB surgeons. I think to do it well takes a lot of experience, and it's difficult to get the experience because it's rare. In the United Kingdom, the population is 60 million, so we will see about 1,000 cholangiocarcinomas per year. So even though at King's we will see something between 10 and 15% of cholangiocarcinomas in the UK, the overall experience is small. Many of the patients present with advanced disease. We've heard today it's complex management and we require a good team of specialists to manage these patients. And surgery, unfortunately, is only possible in a minority. But I think the one message I would like to get over is that many patients are told that the outlook is very poor from the outset, and that shouldn't be the attitude. I think they require a very aggressive approach, and by people who have an optimistic view. Closer. Sounds very loud. So my job was just to talk about the Hiliar cholangiocarcinoma, and this is a very specific group accounting for about 40 to 50% of cholangiocarcinomas. Because of time, I'm not going to talk about cholangiocarcinoma on the background of sclerosis cholangitis, except really in the context of liver transplantation. I think this is a disease with huge challenges. Histology is important in that if you see patients with papillary tumours, they have an excellent prognosis, almost regardless of what you do, and they're excellent candidates for surgery. Now, surgery at the moment is the only potentially curative treatment, and the problem is the infiltrative nature of the cholangiocarcinoma. Often, as I've said, the location of the tumour, and here we're talking about higher sclerosing cholangitis and viral hepatitis may complicate the assessment of liver function and liver disease. And I've hinted briefly, and I won't refer any more to the histology. In terms of the assessment, we've heard quite a bit. CT angiography is, in our centre, the gold standard for assessing the vasculature. MRCP is helpful in mapping. PTC, I think, is useful for patients who are difficult to drain properly. But I don't like PTCs in place in patients for long periods of time, because you do see reflux of tumour cells onto the peritoneum. So I really don't like to see a PTC in for more than a couple of weeks at the most. And then the place of laparoscopy, I think, hasn't been defined, but certainly in the borderline cases, we would do a laparoscopy as part of the initial assessment of the patient. So I think the key components, and I think it's the preoperative preparation that is absolutely vital. There's no point in getting to the day of surgery in theatre and saying, I should have done this, I should have done that. It requires a very careful approach. So effective biliary draining, bilobar, or even 3 stents in to try and get really good drainage. Good imaging to delineate the tumours, then have a clear idea of what you're trying to do, excluding significant extrahepatic disease, and the use of laparoscopy if you have a high index of suspicion. And then ensuring you've got sufficient residual liver function, so the use of embolization in particular. And I'm a big believer in improving the patient fitness. Even 2 or 3 weeks of brisk walking every day for an hour will precondition the patient and get them, I would say, cardiovascularly more fit for surgery. The use of drainage for both diagnosis, decompression, and for direct access to gain cytology for diagnostic reasons, I think is really important. There are a number of classifications that will help you stage the disease, which is helpful in giving the patient a prognosis, but I still like Henri Bismuth's classification, as it has some meaning to me as a surgeon and what I can do. And as I say, the key thing here, you can see there's disconnection between the right and left sides. You have to establish bilobar drainage to allow for good resection. And understanding the biliary anatomy is, I think, really, really key. And unless you have a really good knowledge, you'll get into trouble. And particularly around the caudate lobe anatomy. You can see here that the caudate lobe drains by a variety of bile ducts. It's shown best here. This is for liver transplantation, we're going to do a split. This is looking at the back of the liver. We always look at the front of patients. We never look at the back. We don't understand the back anatomy. But here you can see very clearly the caudate lobe drains by 3 to 5 bile ducts, usually into the left, but it can be into the right. There's usually one dominant duct, but there may be more than that. And understanding and looking for the biliary anatomy is important, I think, in all branches of HPB and advanced liver transplantation techniques. We've spoken about liver manipulation, and we rely, I would say, predominantly on portal vein embolization. But these two techniques of two-stage hepatectomy and ALPS have a place in difficult cases. Now, the point I want to make for portal vein embolization is that for the radiologist, it's really important when you're going to do an extended right hepatectomy that it's not just the right portal vein that's embolized, but the segment 4 vein. Because if you don't do that, you will not get good hypertrophy of the left lateral segment. So having competent radiologists who understand your needs is really key. In terms of liver dissection techniques, there are all different types, and there are more added to this list. In our centre, we use CUSA. It's simple, it's effective, it's very nice for delineating anatomy. For surgeons, I would say learn one technique, learn how to do it well, and then use it appropriately. I like inflow occlusion. I use it for ischemic preconditioning. The published evidence says it lowers blood transfusion requirement, but not much else. I use intermittent occlusion, so 10 minutes on, 5 minutes off, and I like bloodless, relatively bloodless surgery. I'm not quite sure when you get completely bloodless surgery, and I think it's safe in liver resection. Very occasionally one might do vascular isolation, complete vascular isolation, but then you're hurrying, and I think to do good surgery in cholangiocarcinoma, you need to be very precise. You need time, you need to be patient in terms of how you do it. In terms of other aids, well, we've spoken today about how you manage fluid balance. I think that's an interesting question. How you manage coagulopathy, the use of cell salvage you can do in difficult cases, and other help, which I think are really important. In terms of the techniques, well, for high cholangiocarcinoma, I think we're really talking about extended liver resections. And by and large, an extended right hepatectomy is the operation of choice if anatomy allows it. In terms of vascular reconstruction, I think they're relatively straightforward for the portal vein. I like to use a Rex revascularization sometimes because it moves the portal vein away from the hilum completely, and it allows a greater degree of resection into the left hilar plate. And also the portal vein ends up much straighter and without any potential for kinking. All cholangiocarcinomas should have the caudate lobe resected, and I've emphasized the biliary anatomy for that. And then ALPS has been used, as I say, get your preoperative preparation right, you shouldn't need it. If you get into the surgery and you find that you've made a mistake about the quality of the liver or the extent of hypertrophy, you can do either an ALPS or a two-stage procedure of some form. Very occasionally one can do an ex vivo resection where you take the liver out or reflect the liver back so that you get really good access. But again, for the majority of cases, that isn't required. And then what we've been using is, on occasion, the nano knife into the hilum to try and improve clearance at the resection margin. So this is the scheme of the liver and the types of operations. But I have to say, if I think a patient is potentially curative, I'm almost always looking to do an extended right or an extended left en bloc with the caudate lobe. Occasionally, if you've got more extensive tumours, one can perform a pancreatic duodenectomy in combination or as a second stage. This is the no-touch technique that Neuhaus has promoted, and is certainly one that I would use when we divide the distal duct and reflect up. Actually, I combine that with a hepatectomy now. I try to come to the bile duct as the last part of my dissection. I'm not, I've delineated the anatomy with the preoperative imaging. I'm coming through the liver. I'm trying to take the bile duct as far to the left as possible. So early disconnection of the distal duct, and then trying to keep to the left at all times and not going into any of the right vascular structures, but resecting them. And this is just to remind the audience that the reason why extended right is so effective is because the left hepatic duct has this horizontal course and it's much longer, and one can go really quite deep into the left lateral segment, particularly if you've done a REX revascularization, so it can be very impressive. So with the extended hepatectomy, you try to make sure you've got an adequate level of volume and quality so you get good function. And occasionally, preoperative liver biopsy is helpful. Portal vein resection. Sometimes when you've done an extended right, the portal vein is lax and you're worried about kinking. Actually, it's easy just to resect that area and have it nice and straight. If there's tumor involvement, then you do it on block. I do like to put a sling sometimes around the structures just to guide me, and as shown in this schema, actually, if possible, I try to take the dissection so that at the top I've got the middle and the left hepatic vein as a broader route. Because if you get any twisting of the graft, you can get some venous outflow. So if possible, I quite like a broader sort of base to the hepatic vein drainage. It's not essential, and sometimes in more difficult tumours you're forced just to leave the left hepatic vein. And as I say, if you're resecting the portal vein, if you're trained for liver transplantation, this is really very simple and straightforward. And using the nanoknife, this is a case where we used the nanoknife for a tumour that was inoperable, and you can see that you get a good treatment of the area. But as I said, we've used it surgically in resection cases. We start with the nanoknife and then do the resection. The beauty of the nanoknife is that you don't burn. It's merely tumor destruction through cell rupture rather than through regeneration. If you've got infirmed patients and relatively localized disease, then you can do central hepatectomies. And again, you start with the parenchymal dissection and come down onto the bile duct, and you're left with 2 or 3 separate bile duct anastomoses. There is a higher incidence of bile leak using this technique, but it allows you to perform a sort of reasonable operation in more frail patients. The actual results, well, it's clear that morbidity and mortality is higher than hepatectomy for any other indication, and that's because of the difficulties of gaining the drainage in some patients, and often the relatively small liver remnant. But long-term survival is possible, and increasingly so, I think, with the techniques that we have at our disposal. I think it's the Japanese and this publication from Lumura which really set the challenge for everyone worldwide in terms of performing resection for cholangiocarcinoma. And this was an experience of 140 patients. Extreme drainage at times with multiple percutaneous drains, and with an operative mortality of 9%. I think that set the benchmark, and I would say if you're going to be doing cholangiocarcinomas, seriously, the mortality should be less than 9%, and I think in the best centres now, it should be less than 5%. This was French experience of a major hepatectomy for a more advanced cholangiocarcinoma with a perioperative mortality of 5%. I think that does set the benchmark for what we should be trying to achieve. And in terms of lymph nodes, they are important. One can classify them clearly. In 50% of apparently resectable cases, they will be involved. It correlates with survival, but local lymph node involvement shouldn't put you off resection and renal resection. I've already said a lot about portal vein. This is the Japanese experience. It's associated with higher blood loss. Their clamping time is 23 minutes. I think that's quite long. Usually, portal vein anastomosis in probably, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes at most. It's usually very quick. And just suggesting that although survival isn't as high as where you don't have to resect the portal vein, you still get useful intermediate survival. And if you're worried about small for size, I always measure the portal pressure at the end of the procedure. If it's below 15, you've got no worries. If it's 18 millimeters of mercury, you should be starting to worry. And if it's over 20, you should be worried and doing something about it. And I start with a splenic artery ligation. The Japanese like splenectomy, which I think is quite an effective measure. And there's increasing experience of doing limited portal-cable shunts to try and drop the pressure. And in selected cases, that is very useful. The world has moved on and people are offering liver transplantation. Again, it started with Peter Neuhaus, offering liver replacement with a very aggressive resection with a 5-year survival of 38%. A number of centres, including Mayo, have taken that on with quite strict criteria, very aggressive preoperative treatment with radiation, chemotherapy, brachytherapy, and laparotomy to exclude lymph node disease. And their early experience reported a 5-year survival of 76%, tumour survival of 60%. There was quite a lot of criticism because in the explant there was at least a 20% lack of being able to identify any residual tumour, and it led people to wonder if some of these patients had benign strictures. But now there are a number of centres around the world offering liver transplantation, and a cumulative experience from 12 centres published quite recently showed disease-free survival of 65% in 5 years. I should just warn you, that's actuarial survival, but still promising, but a very highly selected group of patients with a high degree of dropout. The morbidity is around infection, and there are innate vascular complications that can be formidable. So, in conclusion, I think this is a really exciting area for surgeons with advanced HPB skills. Preoperative staging and the need for expertise in radiology is key. The knowledge you need to know for anatomy is different. Biliary drainage, again, relying on your radiology and endoscopic colleagues for liver manipulation. Managing these patients, as we've heard this morning, is really key through the surgery and the first 24 hours afterwards, and then expert surgery. Liver transplantation, we don't offer it in the UK for cholangiocarcinoma, not as viewed as a contraindication, but I think the growing evidence would suggest that in a highly selected small group of patients, it offers a way forward. Thank you very much.